Hi everyone! Do you like my new headgear? I think I like it so much that I might even wear it the first week that we are back in church. I wonder if you could tell me what sort of a person would wear a crown. Now, I don't mean one that has to be inflated like this one, I mean a real one. A king or a queen would wear a crown. I wonder if you could also tell me what is the name of the Queen of the United Kingdom. Her name is Queen Elizabeth II, and she has been the Queen for over 68 years. Now, you might have already guessed the word that we are going to use to describe God today, but I'm just going to take my crown off and we're going to have a look at a verse from the Bible. This verse is Psalm 47 verse 7, and I want you to listen out for a word beginning with K that we're going to use to describe God today. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm. Did you hear it? The word is king. God is the king. And the Bible sometimes calls God the King of Kings. Some countries have a queen, some countries have a king, some countries have a president, but all countries have someone who is in charge. And the Bible tells us that we are to show respect to those people and even to pray for those people. But the Bible also tells us that God is the king over all. He is the King of Kings. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, we read the story of King David. He was chosen by God to rule over his people. Before David was king, there was a king called Saul. Saul had a son called Jonathan, and David and Jonathan were very good friends. And in fact, there were times when King Saul wanted to harm David, but Jonathan looked out for him and protected him. Quite some time after David became king, he remembered a promise that he and Jonathan had made to each other. They had promised that they would always look out for and show kindness to members of each other's families. So David said to his servants, "Is there anyone from the family of Jonathan and Saul that I can show kindness to keep this promise?" And his servants said, "Yes, there is. Jonathan had a son called Mephibosheth." Imagine having to learn to spell that name when you start school. When Mephibosheth was only 5 years old, his father Jonathan and his grandfather Saul were killed in battle. Whenever this news got back to their house, of course everyone was very sad, but also very worried. Because in those days, whenever someone new became king, sometimes they wanted to harm members of the old king's family. So the ladies who were looking after Mephibosheth, they knew that they had to hide very, very quickly. So they picked him up and ran really, really quickly. But while doing this, he fell and he hurt his feet very, very badly. And in those days, there weren't wheelchairs and things like that we would have now. And this meant that he really wasn't able to walk very well at all. Now, whenever King David heard about Mephibosheth, he said to his servants, "I want you to go to where he is, and I want you to bring him to me." Now, by this stage, Mephibosheth was grown up, and I can imagine he would be quite worried, because in those days, it wasn't really a good thing to be sent for by the king, especially if you were part of the old king's family. And I can imagine him maybe thinking, "Is he going to harm me? Am I in danger?" But he came along to the palace. Was David going to harm him? No, he wasn't. In fact, David gave him a seat at his table. He welcomed him into his family, and he was going to live in the palace. He was welcomed as part of the king's family. Mephibosheth hadn't done anything to deserve this. The Bible calls this grace, when we're given something that we don't deserve. And that's exactly what God has done for us. God loves us so much that he sent his perfect son Jesus to die on a cross to take the punishment for my sin and your sin. Jesus rose again from the dead to show that he has the power to get rid of sin and death forever. And if we're really sorry for all those wrong things that we have thought and said and done, and ask God to forgive us, because of what Jesus has done, he will forgive us. We can know our sins are forgiven, and we are accepted into God's family. and we know that we have a home in heaven with him someday forever. Just the same way that Mephibosheth was welcomed into King David's family and didn't deserve it, we can be welcomed into God's family, the family of the King of Kings. If you just happened to be in London passing Buckingham Palace, you wouldn't be able to just call in for a wee cup of tea with Queen Elizabeth, because there are lots of rules, there's lots of security, but people who are members of her family, we see them with her quite often in videos and photos. They can talk to her when they want to. How much greater is it that as children of God, members of his family, we can talk to the King of Kings whenever we want to, because of what Jesus has done for us. Now, a few months ago, I received a letter in the post, and it was quite exciting. It was addressed to me, and it had a little crown in the corner. And when I opened it up, it said at the top, Sandringham House. Now, that's another one of the Queen's palaces. I was really excited that this was a letter written by a lady in waiting who writes letters for the Queen, and I was really excited that the Queen had a message for me. But you know, boys and girls, the King of Kings has a message for you and for me every single day. And this, the Bible, that is how God speaks to us. This is his special book that he has given to us, and that's why it's really important that we read it. We ask mums and dads to help us read it, and we ask God to help us to understand it. So today I want you to remember that God is the King of Kings, but because of what Jesus has done for us, we can be part of his family. I'll talk to you soon.